Well, the climate is high on the agenda in New York this week. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres is set to host a climate summit on Wednesday. World leaders are under pressure to present tougher emission reduction targets for 2035 ahead of COP30 in Brazil. Thousands of activists marched down Park Avenue in New York on Saturday under the banner of Make Billionaires Pay to protest against financial institutions profiting off the climate crisis. Demonstrations have also been planned around the world this week ahead of the UNGA and Climate Week. We're going to talk more about this with our environment editor, Valérie Dekimpe, who joins me on the set. Valérie, let's take a step back first. Tell us what these new climate targets, first of all, refer to.
Yeah, we'll be hearing a lot about climate plans ahead of COP30, so let's break it down. A climate target refers to everything a country intends to do to cut greenhouse gas emissions in an effort to keep global temperatures below the safe level of 2 degrees Celsius of warming, ideally 1.5 degrees by the end of the century, as agreed under the Paris Agreement. And these are known as nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. And so when they signed the Paris Agreement back in 2015, countries agreed right from the start to submit new plans every 5 years. The reason being is that it was pretty clear that their efforts were far off track for actually meeting their goals. And so the idea was to close the gap over time with new plans, more ambitious, one round after the other. And so that is why you have a new round every 5 years. In 2015, then we had 2020, and now 2025 for what's going to happen in the years to come. So plans for 2035.
Right. So this year, 2025, is really crucial for new climate pledges. Can we expect any announcements this week in New York?
That is what the UN is hoping for and what Antonio Guterres has repeatedly called for, because countries have not done their homework. So far, governments were invited to submit their new plans by February. And 6 months later, out of 195 countries, 13 met the deadline. 37 have submitted plans in total. And so among those who have submitted plans for 2035, you have Brazil, the UK, Japan, Canada, so major economies. And so an example of what an NDC should look like, you have the UK, for example, pledging to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 81% by 2035 compared to 1990 levels. And so that is a plan that is considered to be aligned with the Paris Agreement. The United States, for example, had submitted a plan, but it's considered largely symbolic because it was made before the country left the Paris Agreement. So now in New York, more than 100 countries have said they will be sending representatives to the summit hosted by Guterres. Among those potentially making announcements, you have South Africa, Mexico, and a much anticipated plan by China. And perhaps a quick word on the EU, because it has now been confirmed that the EU will not be submitting a plan in New York, and that is because governments failed to reach a consensus and land on a figure, and so they will be making an announcement, but later in November before COP30.
All right, so if you have the EU that's facing these internal divisions, you have the US that's out of the Paris Agreement, it seems like a lot of the focus now is actually on China.
Well, China alone is responsible for 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and they're also a major renewable superpower. And so China can certainly make or break climate change efforts. And in recent years, there have been a lot of discussions about China filling that leadership gap. What we know is that Xi Jinping is expected to make a statement in Beijing on its target, followed by a speech by Premier Li Qiang at the UN. The rest, what's in the plan, is just speculation. And so some observers saying China could make a pledge to reduce emissions by 30% by 2035 compared to 2023 levels, and that would be the minimum aligned with the Paris Agreement. Others say 10 to 15% would be more realistic. What is certain is that China's NDC is highly anticipated because it will be the first time that China actually comes with an emission reduction target. Previously, they had only said their emissions will be peaking and then they will reach carbon neutrality by 2060. So whatever China announces now will certainly determine the trajectory that the country will take in the years to come, and also the trajectory of climate change in the coming years too.
Valerie, thanks so much for that. That's Valérie Dekimpe, our environment editor. You are watching France 24. Stay with us.